Hand in your resignation, or we'll terminate you today. Melissa Grant didn't lean forward when she said it. She didn't need to. The words were enough. They settled in the center of the table like something sharp that no one wanted to touch. I took in the room in a single breath. Cameron Foster sat at the head, hands folded, eyes fixed on the polished wood as if the decision had already moved past him. Logan Pierce's chair was angled back just enough to signal comfort. Stephanie Lambert held a slim folder against her ribs, waiting for her cue. My name is Maren Caldwell. I was 46 years old that Friday afternoon. I had worked at Ascent Systems for 21 years. I had written the procedures they still used. I had trained the people now avoiding my eyes. This is happening now, Logan added, tapping his watch once. We don't want this to drag out. The folder slid across the table. No one pushed it toward me. No one explained it. I kept my hands in my lap. So this is the part where I thank you for the opportunity. Stephanie shifted. Uncomfortable. Melissa's mouth tightened. We're offering a clean exit, she said. 3 weeks. Neutral reference. 3 weeks for 2 decades. The math was almost insulting. I looked at Melissa. She had once told me loyalty mattered here. She didn't look back. May I write my own resignation? The question landed softly. Too softly for the room to prepare. Cameron glanced up for the first time. Logan shrugged. The decision passed between them without a word. That's fine, Melissa said. As long as it's today. End of business, Logan echoed. I stood. The chair legs scraped louder than I expected. As I reached the door, I felt the tension loosen behind me, like they'd already checked my name off a list. I turned back. Melissa's shoulders relaxed when I stepped toward her. The hug caught her off guard. It was brief, practiced, the kind you give at funerals. Her voice dropped. Maren, this isn't. I leaned in. Close enough that the others wouldn't hear. Don't be shocked. I let go before she could respond. The story you are about to hear is a fictional work created by the writing team at Revenge AITA. While inspired by real workplace power struggles and professional betrayals, all characters, companies, and events are fictional. This narrative explores dignity, preparation, and what happens when authority mistakes silence for surrender. I didn't return to my office. I didn't pack the framed photos or the plant my team gave me for my 20th anniversary. I walked straight past the security desk and out into the late afternoon light. Behind me, they were already discussing timelines. They believed this had been decided in 30 minutes. They didn't know how long I'd been preparing to leave the room on my own terms. I stayed standing for a moment longer than necessary, long enough for them to wonder if I was about to argue, long enough for Logan to straighten the edge of the folder again, as if it might still end up in my hands. Melissa rose halfway from her chair, not to stop me, just to manage the optics. We'll have HR follow up, she offered. Already moving on, I stepped toward her instead. The hug caught her mid-breath. It wasn't dramatic, no squeeze, no hesitation, just close enough to be unmistakable. Her arms came up a second late. This isn't personal, her voice murmured near my ear, the words stiff and automatic. I leaned in, careful to keep my tone low. Don't be shocked. Her body went rigid, the smallest tell, a flicker of confusion she couldn't mask fast enough. When I pulled back, Cameron was watching us now. Logan's expression had settled into something smug, the look of someone who believes the hardest part is already done. Stephanie had turned her gaze to the table, busying herself with nothing. Melissa tried to recover first. We'll need the letter by 5, she said, too brightly. Email is fine. I nodded once. Not agreement, acknowledgement. Anything else? Cameron asked, already glancing at his phone. No, I replied. That covers it. No one asked where I was going. No one asked if I needed time. They had what they wanted. That was enough. I walked to the door without another word. The handle was cool under my palm. Behind me, chairs shifted. Someone exhaled. Security will deactivate access, Stephanie added, as if checking a box aloud. I know, I said, and opened the door. The hallway felt different immediately, quieter, like a space that had already decided I no longer belonged to it. I didn't stop at my office. I didn't collect the photos, the notebooks, the framed certificate from my 15th year. I kept moving, past familiar faces that looked away too quickly, past the reception desk where a guard hesitated before recognizing me. Have a good weekend, he said, unsure. I plan to, I replied. Outside. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. a message I didn't read. Behind the glass, they were already leaning toward one another, voices low, confident. They thought the moment had passed. They hadn't noticed the shift. I wrote the letter the way I write everything important, slowly, without decoration, without apology. One sentence, 42 words. I read it twice, then a third time, out loud. Not to hear how it sounded, but to confirm what it did. At 4:47 p.m., I sent it to Human Resources. Stephanie responded 3 minutes later, received. We'll process this immediately. No greeting, no acknowledgement of 21 years, just process. At 4:52, my inbox refreshed itself and went blank. The internal chat grayed out mid-screen. The cursor froze, then vanished. I tried to open the shared drive. Access denied. My phone buzzed again. Security has been notified. Stephanie wrote, please return your badge and laptop by end of day Monday. I didn't answer. At 5:05, a final message came through before the account shut down completely. Your resignation has been accepted. That was it. Somewhere upstairs, I knew exactly how it was being framed. A clean exit, voluntary, no confrontation, no exposure. Logan would be smiling by now, telling Cameron this went smoother than expected. Melissa would be relieved, already drafting the transition plan that erased my name from it. Stephanie would file the letter without reading past the first line. No one would pause on the middle. No one would linger on the phrase they assumed was standard. Effective upon full settlement of all compensation owed. By 6, my badge no longer opened the garage gate. The guard at the booth glanced at the screen, then back at me. It's not working, I know, I said, handing it over. He hesitated. You'll need a visitor pass if you come back. I won't, I replied, and drove away. That night, my phone lit up with messages I didn't answer. What happened? Are you okay? They locked you out already. I set the phone face down on the counter and opened my laptop instead. The contract sat exactly where I'd left it. Tabs marked, clauses highlighted, notes in the margins from years ago, written for reasons no one remembered anymore. I didn't celebrate. I didn't react. I waited. By the time they realized what they had accepted, the building would already be closed. The first day passed without anything at all. No calls, no emails, not even the automated message everyone else received when access was revoked. Silence, complete and deliberate. On the second day, my phone began to light up. Names I recognized, people I had hired, people who had sat in my office and cried when projects collapsed and deadlines burned. Did you quit? They said it was voluntary. Are you okay? I didn't answer any of them. By the third day, the tone shifted. HR won't explain what happened. Your calendar is gone. They're already reassigning accounts. I turned the phone face down and opened my laptop. The employment agreement waited where I had left it. Tabs still marking the sections I had reviewed years ago and never thought I would need. Change of control. Termination without cause. Good reason. Settlement language most people skim past because they trust the room they're sitting in. I didn't skim. I moved slowly, line by line, matching the contract to handwritten notes from board meetings no one remembered anymore. Dates, names, decisions that had been justified as temporary and then quietly made permanent. On the fourth day, I made one call. Elizabeth Hartman answered on the second ring. I haven't heard from them. I told her, that's expected, came the reply. Calm, certain. They think this is finished. They've locked me out completely. Yes, I waited. Her voice didn't rush to fill the space. That was one of the reasons I trusted her. Do nothing, she continued. If they're confident, they'll move fast. If they're uncertain, they'll hesitate. Either way, silence works in your favor. So I wait. Exactly, she said. Wait. The 5th and 6th days blended together. More messages I didn't answer. A voicemail from a number I didn't recognize that I deleted without listening to. By the 7th morning, the quiet felt different, heavier, less certain. At 7:43, my phone rang. I looked at the screen. Denver area code, unknown number. I let it ring once more before picking up. Good morning, I said, already knowing the silence was over. The phone stopped ringing the moment I answered. Good morning, a man said. After a breath he didn't quite steady. This is Jonathan Winters, General Counsel for Dominion Corporate Holdings. I waited. There's a sentence in your resignation letter we need to discuss. The way he said sentence told me everything. Careful, precise. Already aware something had gone wrong. I'm listening, I replied. A pause followed. Papers shifting, someone else in the room, not speaking. The phrase regarding effectiveness. He continued. We need clarification on what you meant. I glanced at the clock. 7:43 a.m. Exactly 1 week after my access disappeared. Which word is causing trouble, I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. Effective, he said. Specifically, the condition attached to it. I leaned back in my chair and let the silence do its work. He filled it too quickly. This is a routine matter, he added. We just want to make sure there's no misunderstanding. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. Put me on speaker. I'm sorry you heard me. I said. Put me on speaker. The sound that followed was unmistakable. A click, a faint echo, the room opening up. Thank you, I continued. Now everyone who needs to hear this can. Someone cleared their throat in the background. Not Jonathan. We're prepared to process final payment, he said carefully. But your resignation was accepted last Friday. That's why this call is unexpected. It was accepted, I agreed. That doesn't make it effective. Silence again, this one sharper. You'll need to explain that, Jonathan said. Slower now. I was very clear in the letter, I replied. My resignation takes effect upon full settlement of all compensation owed under my employment agreement and applicable law. That's standard language. Someone muttered off the line. No, I said, without raising my voice. It's precise language. Jonathan inhaled. Are you saying you consider yourself still employed? I'm saying the condition hasn't been met. The click of a pen, a chair shifting. There are implications to that position, Jonathan said. I'm aware, I replied. You should be too. The line went quiet, not disconnected, just waiting. When Jonathan spoke again, the strain was gone, replaced by calculation. We may need to involve additional parties, he said. I recommend it, I replied. You'll want them listening as well. I ended the call before he could respond. The phone stayed silent in my hand. Upstairs, in rooms I was no longer allowed to enter. The story they thought was finished had just reopened. The speaker clicked on. The line widened. I could hear the room now chairs, breathing. The faint rustle of paper being gathered too quickly. Everyone's on, Jonathan said. Good, I replied. Then we won't need to repeat ourselves. A pen tapped once, then stopped. My resignation has not taken effect, I continued, keeping my pace even. No final settlement has occurred, until it does. The condition attached to that letter remains unmet. Silence. A page turned. Another followed it, faster. You were paid through your last day, someone said, offline. Paid through is not settled, I answered. Compensation owed includes base salary, accrued benefits, and contractual obligations triggered by a change of control. A breath caught. Someone whispered a name, not mine. Jonathan cleared his throat. Our understanding is that acceptance constitutes. Acceptance does not override conditions. I cut in. You accepted a conditional resignation. Conditions govern effectiveness. The room went still again. This time, the quiet stretched. I let it. A chair scraped. A voice, lower, meant not to carry. Check the agreement. I have, I said. Before anyone could ask, more than once. Jonathan's tone shifted, losing its softness. You're asserting continued employment. I'm stating a fact, I replied. Until full settlement, I remain employed with all attendant rights. A pen dropped. No one laughed. And there's more, I added, not raising my voice. Unresolved employment disputes constitute material legal exposure. That exposure attaches to any transaction currently under review. A sharp inhale, papers shuffled again, this time with urgency. You're referring to the pending divestment, Jonathan said. I'm referring to risk, I replied. The kind that freezes approvals and delays signatures. The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was calculation. We need time, Jonathan said finally. You've had time, I replied. You just didn't use it. When the line disconnected, it wasn't abrupt, it was careful, deliberate. I set the phone down and closed my laptop. Across the city. Doors were opening that had been shut with confidence a week earlier. I didn't hear the panic directly. I heard it through voices that suddenly forgot how confident they were. Jonathan called back before noon. This time. He didn't bother with pleasantries. The chairman has been briefed. He said, so has Dominion. I waited. There's concern about timing, he continued. The divestment review is being paused. Because of legal exposure, I replied. A pause. Then, reluctantly, yes. In another room across the city. Cameron Foster was speaking faster than usual. I knew the cadence well. He used it when control was slipping. This is being blown out of proportion. His voice snapped through the speaker Jonathan hadn't muted. It's one employee. One employee tied to an unresolved employment dispute. Richard Hale cut in. His voice carried the weight of the boardroom without needing volume. That makes it material. Logan Pierce tried to salvage it. We can resolve this quickly. The cost is manageable. How manageable? Richard asked. No one answered right away. Jonathan filled the gap. The agreement includes change of control provisions, severance obligations, deferred compensation, and exposure, Richard added. If this escalates, silence followed. Not confusion this time. Calculation. In a different corner of the call, Melissa Grant finally spoke. Her voice sounded unfamiliar, tighter. She agreed to resign. She said, she hugged me. This was cooperative. I pictured her face then, the way her shoulders had relaxed when she thought the hard part was over. Cooperative doesn't mean careless, Richard replied. It means prepared. Logan's voice cracked. We should have read the letter. No one disagreed. Jonathan turned his attention back to me. We're assembling options. I suggest you move quickly, I said. Delays have consequences. And you're comfortable with this position? Cameron demanded. His restraint gone. I'm comfortable with the contract, I replied. You signed it long before this week. The line went quiet again. Somewhere between the pauses. The deal they had been celebrating only days earlier was quietly removed from the agenda. Calendars cleared. Advisors called back in. When the call ended, it wasn't with resolution, it was with urgency. For the first time since Friday afternoon, they weren't deciding my future. They were trying to protect theirs. The first offer arrived before the end of the day. Jonathan's voice was measured again, the strain tucked neatly behind formality. Dominion is prepared to resolve this quickly. We believe this figure reflects good faith. I let him finish. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make the number feel small without saying it was. That doesn't satisfy the contract, I replied. A breath, papers shifting, someone else listening. It's a significant amount, he said carefully. It's incomplete, I said. And incomplete settlements don't trigger effectiveness. The second offer came an hour later, slightly higher, still missing pieces. Jonathan tried a different approach. You understand this isn't personal. I understand exactly what it is, I said. This is a negotiation, not a favor. He waited. My terms are straightforward, I continued. Full contractual compensation, including all amounts triggered by the change of control. Severance is written, not summarized. Written. A pen scratched somewhere on the line. A letter of recommendation, I added, on company letterhead. Signed by the chief executive officer. Accurate. No qualifiers. Jonathan hesitated. That may be difficult. It's required, I replied. Along with mutual non-disparagement, another pause, and a deadline. I said, you have 10 business days. After that, the exposure grows. There was no argument this time, only calculation. You're not asking for anything beyond the agreement, Jonathan said. I'm asking for exactly what it says, I replied. Nothing more, nothing less. When the call ended, it wasn't with resistance. It was with urgency disguised as cooperation. The following morning, Cameron's name appeared on my screen. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail instead. Marin, we can resolve this. Let's not escalate. I forwarded it to Elizabeth without comment. By afternoon, the tone had changed again. Shorter emails, fewer qualifiers, legal language stripped of persuasion. They weren't trying to win anymore. They were trying to finish. When the revised terms arrived, every clause I had named was there, clean, precise, initialed in the margins. I didn't celebrate. I reviewed. Precision doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't need to. It waits until the other side realizes there's nothing left to argue. The notification arrived without ceremony. I read the subject line once, then again. No exclamation point, no apology. Just confirmation that the funds had been released and scheduled for same-day settlement. Elizabeth called before I could reach for the phone. It's done, she said. Every term, every clause. I opened the attachment while she stayed on the line. No red lines, no footnotes. The severance language mirrored the contract exactly. The change of control provision sat where it always had. no longer treated as theoretical. The letter of recommendation was attached last, on company letterhead, signed by Cameron Foster in a hand that looked steadier than his voice had been. "Once you sign," Elizabeth added, "your resignation becomes effective." I paused. Not hesitation, recognition. "Send it," I said. The signature field accepted my name. The document timestamped itself, a quiet click, and 21 years condensed into a single legal moment. Jonathan called 10 minutes later. "Wire has cleared," he said. "No warmth, no resistance, just confirmation. Then we're finished." I replied. "Yes," he agreed. "We are." 2 weeks passed before the board moved. Richard Hale didn't call me. He didn't need to. The announcement came through industry channels instead, leadership change. Effective immediately. Cameron was out, the phrasing was careful, the meaning wasn't. Melissa resigned the following Monday. No statement, no farewell. I heard about it from a former colleague who spoke softly, as if the walls still had ears. She said it wasn't what she signed up for. I closed my laptop when the message ended. The apartment was quiet in the way it had been all week, not empty, just unclaimed. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt precise, like a door closing exactly when it should. By the time I stood up, the company I had built no longer owned my time, and for the first time in years, neither did anyone else. I walked through downtown Denver without checking the time for the first time in years. No calendar alerts, no urgency disguised as importance. Just movement, unclaimed. A former colleague spotted me near the corner by the old courthouse. She hesitated before speaking, like she wasn't sure which version of me she was allowed to address. "They're still trying to figure out how you did it," she said quietly. "I didn't do anything unusual," I replied. "I read what I signed." She smiled at that. Not because it was clever, because it was true. Word traveled faster after that. Not gossip questions. People didn't ask for revenge strategies. They asked how to protect themselves, how to read clauses they'd ignored, how to document conversations without turning bitter, how to leave without being erased. I started consulting the way I'd always worked: methodical, quiet, precise. No flashy pitch, no promises, just preparation. One contract at a time, one career at a time. A man I'd never met before called me one afternoon. He sounded nervous, almost apologetic. "They're pushing me out," he said. "I don't know what I'm allowed to ask for." "You're allowed to ask for what's written," I told him. "Nothing more, nothing less." He didn't thank me. He didn't need to. The silence on the line shifted. That was enough. Later that evening, Elizabeth checked in. "You did well," she said. "So did you." "No," she replied. "You listened." That stayed with me. Loyalty isn't silence. Preparation isn't aggression. And dignity doesn't require permission. They told me to resign. I did. On my terms. When you give years of your life to an institution, never confuse familiarity with protection. Read what you sign, document what you build, and remember that your value does not disappear just because someone decides you're inconvenient. The founder's son poured wine on me in front of hundreds of powerful people, and in that instant, the room decided I was meant to swallow it quietly. "Careful," Blake Kessler drawled, lifting his glass just enough for the cameras to catch the gesture. "These events can be overwhelming for newcomers." I met his smile without returning it. I'm not new. A few heads turned. That wasn't the reaction he expected. He glanced at my name tag, then laughed, too loudly. "Claire Hart? Right. The fund?" His eyes flicked past me, as if searching for someone more important. "You must feel lucky to be here." "I'm here to close," I replied. The word hung there. Blake's smile tightened. He tipped his glass. The wine spilled slowly, deliberately, staining the front of my dress. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the circle around us. Then laughter, uneven, nervous, relieved it wasn't aimed at them. Flashes popped. Someone whispered my name like it was a warning. Blake stepped back, palms open. "Wow." That was clumsy. His grin widened. "You blend in so easily." No one moved. No one intervened. The silence pressed in, heavy with expectation. I looked down at the dark red spreading across the fabric, then back up at him. "You're finished," a beat. Confusion flickered across his face. "Relax," he muttered. "It's just wine." I reached for a napkin, dabbed once, then let my hand fall. No, I said quietly. It isn't. Behind him, conversations stalled. People watched, waiting for the part where I apologized, laughed it off, or disappeared. That was how this usually went. Claire. Nina murmured at my shoulder. She wasn't looking at me. She was watching the exits, the board members, the phones already coming out. Do you want to step outside? I shook my head. Not yet, Blake scoffed. You should go change. We'll handle things from here. I didn't answer him. I unlocked my phone instead, scrolled past unread messages, and opened the document I already knew by heart. The clause sat there, plain and unemotional, waiting. A few feet away, someone stopped laughing. Another phone buzzed. I lifted mine to my ear. The story you're about to hear is a fictional work created by the writing team at Revenge AITA. While inspired by real corporate environments, power imbalances, and emotional truths professionals often face, all characters, companies, and events are fictional. This narrative explores dignity, accountability, and the consequences of underestimating the wrong person. Dana, I murmured into the phone, eyes still on Blake as his confidence began to falter. We have a public breach, cameras, witnesses, counterparty family involved. A pause, then a single question on the other end. I didn't hesitate. Proceed? Around us. The room began to shift, though no one understood why yet. Blake's smile faded as he noticed the sudden quiet. The way attention was no longer on me but on the screens lighting up in people's hands. Why do powerful people always confuse silence with submission? I felt it before I heard it, the subtle shift. The way the room leaned away from me as if humiliation were contagious. Conversations resumed in fragments, just loud enough to carry. She's lucky to even be here. Probably a placeholder. They'll swap her out by morning. None of them bothered to lower their voices. They didn't think they had to. Blake drifted closer again, emboldened by the lack of resistance. The stain on my dress seemed to amuse him. You're taking this well, he remarked, eyes scanning the onlookers. Most people would be mortified. I don't embarrass easily, I replied. That earned a smirk. That's good. This world can be rough on people who don't belong. Behind him, Martin Kessler stood rigid, jaw tight, already calculating damage control. Evelyn Kessler whispered something to a board member, her gaze cutting briefly in my direction before sliding past me, as if I were already irrelevant. They were all making the same mistake. Nina shifted closer, her voice low. They think you're going to let it go. I know, I murmured. My phone vibrated once in my hand, not a message, just a reminder. I ignored it and opened the contract instead. Scrolling past pages no one ever quoted at parties like this. Revenue projections, governance language. Then the section everyone treated as decoration, reputation, and conduct. I read it again, slowly. Public behavior, family representatives, material harm, immediate remedies. Blake laughed at something over my shoulder. Relax, he tossed out, not even looking at me now. This isn't a boardroom. That's where you're wrong, I answered. He turned, frowning. What was that? I didn't repeat myself. I kept reading. Not one signature from the Kessler side acknowledged this clause with anything more than a cursory initial. No amendments, no carve-outs. Confidence had made them careless. Across the room, another phone buzzed, then another. Martin straightened. Evelyn stopped whispering. Nina leaned in, barely containing a smile. They still don't see it. I locked my screen and slipped the phone back into my palm. They will. The noise around us continued, unaware that something essential had already shifted. Who do you call when you don't need permission? I stepped away from the circle just enough to breathe. Not enough to disappear. That mattered. Blake watched me go with a crooked smile, already turning his attention elsewhere, certain the moment had passed. It hadn't. I raised the phone to my ear while the room pretended not to stare. Dana, I said, keeping my voice level. I need you listening, not reacting. On the other end, a pause, then focus. Dana Cho didn't waste words. She never had. Go on. Public incident, I continued. Founder's son, deliberate act. Cameras everywhere. Witnesses include board members and press. Another pause, shorter this time. Counterparty family involvement confirmed. Yes, any attempt to de-escalate. They laughed. That was enough. I heard fingers moving, keys tapped. a mind already mapping consequences. The clause applies, Dana replied. Reputation and conduct. Immediate review authority is yours. I'm aware. Silence stretched. Not uncertainty. Alignment. Do you want a hold, she asked, or a full freeze? I looked up. Blake was mid-story now, glass refilled, confidence restored. Martin Kessler stood a few feet away, pretending to scan the room while watching me from the corner of his eye. Evelyn Kessler had gone still, like a chess player sensing a mistake too late. Freeze, I said. Authorization and release. A breath on the line. Then resolve. Done. I'm notifying compliance and finance. Wire stops tonight. Good. Claire, Dana added. Softer now. Once this goes out, there's no quiet reversal. I know. I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my hand without looking at it. Around me, conversations stumbled. Someone laughed too late. Another voice trailed off mid-sentence. Nina appeared at my side, eyes sharp. What did you do? I followed procedure. Across the room, a phone buzzed. Then another. Martin straightened abruptly. Evelyn turned toward him, lips parting, her question unspoken. Blake noticed the shift last. His smile faltered, just slightly, as the noise thinned and attention drifted not toward him, but toward the screens lighting up in people's hands. How fast can confidence turn into fear? The first phone vibrated near the bar, then another, closer. A ripple followed, subtle, unmistakable, until the sound stitched its way across the room. Conversation stumbled, laughter arrived a beat too late and died where it landed. Nina angled her screen toward me without a word. The subject line glowed stark and precise. Deal status, suspended immediate review. No flourish, no apology. Across the room, Martin Kessler's posture changed. He stopped pretending to mingle and stared at his phone as if it had betrayed him. His jaw tightened. The smile he wore for donors didn't fit anymore. He looked up and caught Evelyn Kessler's eye. What is this? Evelyn's voice cut through the din, low but commanding. People nearby went still. Martin leaned in, shielding his screen. It can't be right. We didn't authorize. Evelyn straightened, chin lifting. Then find out who did. Blake laughed again. Too loud, too quick. Everyone relax. It's a glitch. He raised his glass toward a cluster of guests. These things happen when compliance gets bored. No one laughed back. A board member stepped away from him, eyes flicking between Blake and the subject line, repeating on screens around the room. Another guest murmured something into a phone and walked off. Already disengaging, Blake noticed the distance last. Hey, he snapped, trying to reclaim the moment. You're overreacting. I didn't move. That was the point. Standing still kept me visible, kept the center from sliding back to him. Martin crossed the space toward me, careful now, measured. Claire, he began, voice lowered. Let's talk privately. I held his gaze. There's nothing private about a public breach. Evelyn joined him, eyes sharp. You're suggesting a suspension over a party incident. I nodded once. I'm acknowledging the trigger. Behind her, Blake's grin thinned. He checked his phone again, then again. Confusion seeping in where certainty had been. The room had shifted its weight, and he felt it, attention no longer following him, but gathering around the quiet certainty he couldn't interrupt. I stayed where I was as the murmurs turned into questions, and the questions into distance. The crack had opened. The room was choosing sides. Who actually runs a family empire when everything is at risk? Martin reached me first. He moved with the calm of someone trained to smooth edges, hands open, voice low enough to suggest reason. Claire, let's step aside. We can clear this up without an audience. I stayed where I was. The audience is the issue. Evelyn arrived a heartbeat later, presence tightening the air. She didn't look at me at first, her attention fixed on Martin. This is spiraling. Fix it. Then her eyes cut to me. You're escalating a misunderstanding. Blake pushed between them, impatience cracking through his grin. This is ridiculous. You can't freeze a deal over a spill. He gestured at my dress. That's not governance. That's theater. Theater is when nothing changes, I replied. This did. Martin exhaled, choosing his words. You know the scale of what's at stake. $1.8 billion doesn't pause because someone had a bad moment. It pauses because your representative created a public breach, I said. Documented, witnessed. At a sanctioned event, Evelyn's jaw set. We don't accept unilateral moves. I didn't make one, I answered. The structure did, Blake scoffed. You're hiding behind fine print. I'm standing on it. Martin's eyes flicked to Evelyn, then back to me. What do you want? I didn't hesitate. Accountability. For a glass of wine, Blake snapped. For conduct? I said, evenly. For pattern. For risk. Evelyn stepped closer. Voice firm now. Practiced. You're not canceling this deal. I'm not, I agreed. The controls are. A murmur rippled nearby. A board member leaned away from Blake. Another guest lowered their phone. Already done listening. Blake's confidence cracked. You think you're in charge here? I think the authorization speaks for itself. Silence followed. Thick and undeniable. Martin swallowed, understanding settling in. Evelyn's gaze hardened, recalculating. Blake looked around for allies and found distance instead. I felt the shift complete, not loud, not dramatic. Just rules doing what rules were built to do. Why do powerful people always minimize the moment they cross the line? Evelyn broke the silence first. Her tone softened, the way it did when she wanted control back without appearing to take it. Let's be precise, she said. This is an optics issue, nothing more. Optics are the issue, I replied. They're the measure. She tilted her head, studying me. You're turning a social misstep into a governance crisis. I'm recognizing one, Blake snapped before she could continue. This is insane. His voice rose, sharp with disbelief. You're blowing this out of proportion because you were embarrassed. A few people flinched, others leaned in. I wasn't embarrassed, I answered. I was informed. Informed of what he spread his hands, daring me. That you don't belong here, I didn't rush the response. I didn't need to. That your family treats risk like a joke. Martin shifted his weight, a warning glance cutting toward Blake. It was too late. You don't get to lecture us, Blake continued. You're not even the final authorization, I said calmly, for the release. The words landed, not loudly, cleanly. Evelyn's expression tightened. That authority exists within partnership. It exists within controls, I replied. And those controls are active. Nina stepped closer and angled her tablet toward me. Headlines stacked one after another, still updating. Industry alerts. Analyst pings. The clip, already trimmed, already spreading. Evelyn saw it. Martin saw it. Blake didn't want to. This doesn't have to leave this room, Evelyn said. It already has. Blake looked around, searching faces for reassurance. He found distance, phones down, eyes away. The room was no longer his. Martin spoke carefully. If we address this publicly, the address is the problem, I said. Public behavior triggered a public response. Evelyn exhaled through her nose, patience thinning. You're enjoying this, I shook my head. I'm finishing it. Another alert chimed. Nina's screen refreshed. Martin closed his eyes for a moment, recalculating in real time. Blake's voice dropped, finally uncertain. You can't let this define us. I met his gaze. You already did. How do you contain a disaster once the world is watching? The first clip surfaced before the servers finished syncing. Nina didn't have to explain, she simply turned the tablet toward me. Blake's laugh. The tilt of the glass. The red streak across my dress. Someone had already added captions. Someone else had slowed it down. Phones rang with a different urgency now. Analysts didn't ask what happened. They asked what it meant. Words like governance and control appeared in messages that had never included my name before. A ripple cut through the room as a path opened. Richard Kessler moved with the authority of ownership, measured, unhurried, practiced. He stopped a step too close, eyes sharp but voice restrained. Claire, he began, as if we were old acquaintances. This has gone far enough. I held his gaze. It went exactly far enough. He glanced at the screens around us, then back to me. We can fix this. A statement, a restructuring, whatever you need. Martin stood just behind him, silent now. Evelyn watched without blinking. Blake hovered at the edge, suddenly small. I'm listening, Richard continued. Influence, access, compensation. He named a figure that would have quieted many rooms. It's not a pricing issue, I replied. He leaned in, lowering his voice. Everything is a pricing issue, not this. The room thinned. People pretended to check messages while waiting for my answer to become theirs. We'll make it right, Richard pressed. Privately. It wasn't private. His jaw tightened. You're choosing escalation. I'm choosing boundaries. A notification chimed another outlet, another analyst note. Nina didn't look up this time. She didn't need to. Richard straightened, the calculation finishing behind his eyes. You're leaving us no room. I didn't take it. I said, you gave it away. Silence settled, heavier than before. Richard stepped back, nodding once not agreement, but acknowledgement. The offer was withdrawn without ceremony. Around us, the room adjusted to a new reality. The story had escaped. And nothing inside these walls could pull it back. What does a $1.8 billion decision sound like? It sounded like a phone vibrating once in my hand. Nina leaned in, already reading the confirmation before I opened it. Heartbridge Capital has issued the termination, she murmured. Full language, no ambiguity. I scrolled. The words were exact, cold, irreversible, due to a verified breach of reputational and conduct standards. Heartbridge Capital hereby terminates its participation. No adjectives, no emotion, just consequence. Across the room, Martin's phone rang. He answered it, listened for less than 10 seconds, then lowered it slowly, the color drained from his face. Trading just reacted. He said to no one in particular, we're down. Evelyn closed her eyes, once. When she opened them, the calculation was gone. This wasn't a messaging problem anymore. Blake lunged toward his father. You can't let this happen. Richard didn't look at him. Step back. That's it, Blake's voice cracked. You're just letting her. Richard turned then, sharp and final. You did this. Blake froze. An assistant approached quietly, voice low but firm. The board has requested you suspend all observer access, effective immediately. Blake stared. You can't be serious. The assistant didn't answer. He didn't have to. Around us, guests drifted away in small groups, already rewriting their alliances. Phones stayed out, messages flew. A family portrait that had taken decades to polish was fracturing in real time. Martin cleared his throat. We'll issue a statement. You will. I agreed. It won't change the outcome. Evelyn looked at me then, something brittle in her expression. You could have handled this differently. I did, I replied. I handled it correctly. Nina touched my arm. Car's ready. I nodded and stepped away as the room reorganized itself without me. No one followed. No one tried to stop me. Behind us, the deal finished dying quietly, precisely exactly the way it had been built to end. Who really pays when arrogance goes unchecked? The calls started before dawn. I let them ring. By the time the sun reached my window, the story had already chosen its angle. Governance failure, one headline read. Another used the word pattern. The footage of Blake's laugh looped beside screenshots of Heartbridge's termination notice. No commentary from me. None was needed. Nina skimmed the morning briefings at the kitchen counter. 3 funds pulled back from Kessler Group overnight, she said. 2 more are reviewing exposure. Expected, I replied. She hesitated. They're asking for you. Networks, industry panels, even the Senate subcommittee's office left a message. Decline, I said, all of it. By mid-morning, Martin Kessler's name appeared beside phrases like internal review and temporary restructuring. Evelyn's statements grew shorter, more defensive. Richard's didn't appear at all. Heartbridge's inbox told a different story. Requests for meetings, invitations that used to take months now arrived with suggested times. Dana forwarded one message with a single line beneath it. This is what credibility looks like. Blake's name stopped appearing. His accounts went quiet. A contact at another firm texted Nina board observer privileges revoked. He's done. That evening, my phone buzzed once more. A number I recognized. One I didn't save. You didn't have to erase him, Martin's voice said, hoarse. I didn't, I replied. The structure did. Silence stretched between us, heavy and honest. This will follow us, he said finally. It should. After the call ended, I stood by the window, watching the city move on without noticing me at all. That was fine. The point had never been visibility. It had been clarity. Nina set her tablet down. They're still trying to understand how it happened. I allowed myself a small exhale. They'll spend years doing that, outside. Traffic surged, indifferent. The noise of the night before had faded into record, precedent, consequence. And somewhere in that quiet, The lesson settled unalterable, already in motion. What does silence mean when you're no longer afraid of losing? The car pulled away from Manhattan without ceremony. Nina sat beside me, quiet now, the work done. Streetlights slid across the window, then fell behind us. My phone vibrated once. It's done. Dana's message needed nothing else. Nina glanced over. Termination confirmed. Confirmed. I answered. She nodded, relief passing through her shoulders. They'll keep trying to reframe it. They always do. The city thinned into distance. I felt lighter than I expected, not triumphant, not relieved, clear. That surprised me. I had imagined anger would linger, or satisfaction would spike. Neither came. Nina broke the quiet. They're calling it revenge. I smiled faintly. That word helps them avoid responsibility. You don't see it that way. No. I looked out the window. Revenge needs an audience. This needed a boundary. My phone buzzed again. A forwarded note from compliance. Brief and formal. No further action required. Controls functioned as designed. I locked the screen. Nina hesitated, then asked, "Do you regret not saying more?" At the end I said what mattered, I replied. The rest would have been noise. She considered that. You never raised your voice. I didn't need to. The driver merged onto the highway. The city receded, indifferent, intact. Somewhere behind us, lawyers would argue language, boards would reshuffle, statements would soften. None of that touched what had already been said. I thought of Blake's laugh, of the glass tilting, of how certain he'd been that silence meant surrender. I hadn't corrected him then. I had let the structure do it later. Nina leaned back, finally at ease. So that's it. That's it. When the car slowed near my building, I gathered my coat and paused before stepping out. The night air was cool, steady. For the first time since the gala, I felt finished. Silence is not the absence of power. It is the discipline to act without spectacle, the courage to enforce boundaries without apology, and the wisdom to let systems speak when words would only dilute the truth. He ended my career with a stamp, not a conversation. Sit, my boss said, without looking up. This won't take long. My name is Eliza Hart, and I had worked for him long enough to recognize that tone. It meant the decision was already made. The HR manager sat beside him, hands folded too neatly, eyes fixed on the table. No introductions, no preamble. My boss slid a single sheet of paper toward me. Restructuring, he said. Your role no longer fits the direction of the company. I scanned the page. My name was spelled correctly. The reason was vague. The language was sharp. Performance concerns, I said aloud. He smiled. That's standard wording. I've never had a negative review. You're not being judged, he replied. You're being removed. The HR manager finally spoke. Effective immediately. I looked up. Immediately my boss picked up the stamp. He pressed it down hard. Once, then again, as if the sound mattered. Worthless employees don't need explanations, he said, and slid the paper back to me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Don't bother checking, he added. Your access is already disabled. As if on cue, my email refreshed and locked me out. A second later, the HR manager's screen lit up. Staffing update just went out, she said quietly. I felt the room tilt, but I kept my voice steady. So that's it. That's it, my boss said. Security will walk you out. I stood. He didn't. That morning before this room, before the stamp, before the word worthless, I had taken a call I was still trying to understand. A trust attorney. A calm voice. Paperwork verified. Voting control transferred. Effective immediately. He didn't know any of that. As I reached for the termination letter, my boss finally looked at me, not with anger, with relief. You should have known your place, he said. I nodded once and turned toward the door, holding the paper he had signed so confidently. The story you're about to hear is a fictional work created by the writing team at Revenge AITA. It explores power, betrayal, and the moment when silence stops being weakness. While the characters and events are imagined, the situations reflect real workplace dynamics and real emotional consequences. The hallway felt quieter than it should have. A security guard waited without meeting my eyes. I folded the termination letter carefully and slipped it into my bag. The stamp ink was still fresh. He believed he had finished with me. I stepped into the elevator, already knowing this was only the beginning. What do you do when you hold power you're not allowed to reveal yet? The attorney didn't offer condolences. She didn't ask about my job. She slid a folder across the table and waited until I opened it. "Everything has been verified," she said. "The trust has executed." I flipped through documents dense with language most people never read until it's too late. My name appeared again and again, precise and final. "You now hold controlling voting rights in the parent company," she continued. "Not ownership in the symbolic sense. Control." The word settled slowly. "I was terminated this morning," I told her. She didn't react. "I assumed that might happen. That surprised me." "You assumed?" She folded her hands. "These transitions tend to expose people." I closed the folder. "So I call the board, I correct it." She shook her head once. "Clean, final." "You do nothing." The silence stretched. "There is a quiet period," she explained, "until the transfer is formally acknowledged. Any visible interference can be challenged. If that happens, the board can freeze your authority before it ever activates." I leaned back, so I let it stand. "For now, I lost my job." "You lost a title," she replied. "Those are not the same thing." I looked down at the termination letter folded in my bag. They sent an internal notice, labeled me redundant. Her gaze sharpened. "And the letter itself. What about it?" She reached for the copy I handed over, reading more carefully than anyone had that morning. Her finger paused on a line. "This language is aggressive," she said. "And the timing is careless. Careless enough to matter." She didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, "One wrong move, and the board can challenge everything. But mistakes like this create records." She slid the letter back. "This doesn't give you permission to act, but it changes what can be examined." I stood to leave. The power sat heavy and unused, like a door I wasn't allowed to open yet. As I stepped outside, I felt the weight of that stamped page again. Not as an ending, as leverage. Why fire someone quietly when you can erase them publicly? The answer didn't come from anger. It came from pattern. I laid the termination letter on my kitchen table and set my notebook beside it. Same table where I had once spread out project forecasts, compliance memos, and risk summaries he never thanked me for. The timing wasn't emotional. It was strategic. 3 weeks earlier, I had flagged a development proposal during a senior review. The numbers were inflated. The assumptions were thin. The approval window was tight. This exposure isn't theoretical. I had told him then. If the zoning appeal fails, we absorb the loss. He hadn't argued. He'd smiled the way people do when they're already planning around you. You don't build power by asking permission. I remembered the room going quiet after that. Not because he was right, but because no one wanted to be next. I had pushed again 2 days later, sent a written objection, requested an independent review. That request triggered a delay clause. A small one, invisible to anyone who didn't understand the structure, but delays cost bonuses. I pulled up the internal calendar on my laptop. The board's incentive committee meeting was scheduled for the end of the week. Performance metrics locked the morning before. My removal created a clean line. No objections, no documented dissent, no compliance officer asking inconvenient questions. He hadn't fired me because I failed. He fired me because I wouldn't look away. I scrolled through old messages. Short, polite, professional. Each one a reminder of where I had stood. "Let's revisit this next quarter." Noted. "But we're moving forward. Your concerns are on record." On record. That phrase mattered now. I closed the notebook and folded the termination letter once more. The stamp sat squarely over my name. Bold and permanent. He hadn't just erased my role. He had cleared his path. And whatever he was pushing through next, he believed no one was left to slow him down. What if the document meant to erase me couldn't survive legal daylight? My attorney, Mara Collins, read the termination letter without interruption. She didn't react to the stamp or the wording at first. She let the silence stretch long enough to make me uneasy. "This wasn't rushed," I said. "He planned it." Mara didn't look up. "That's obvious." She set the page down and reached for a pen. "Tell me exactly when this was signed." "Late morning, less than an hour after I was called in." Her pen stopped. "During the quiet period." "Yes." She nodded once, then flipped the page over. "That alone is careless. Careless enough to reverse it. Careless enough to trigger scrutiny," she replied. "Not the same thing." I exhaled slowly. She tapped the stamp. "Next problem, authority. He's my direct supervisor." "Which gives him recommendation power," she said, not unilateral termination power under the governance rules that apply during a transfer window. She slid her pen down the page. This language here, performance concerns. Failure to align. Organizational drag. My jaw tightened. That's not neutral, she continued. That's reputational harm recorded in an internal HR file. He wanted it documented. Then he documented his own exposure. I leaned forward. Exposure to what Mara met my eyes. A governance review. When terminations intersect with ownership transitions, the board is obligated to examine motive, authority, and impact. I didn't speak. I didn't want to interrupt the momentum. She gathered the pages into a neat stack. This letter doesn't give you permission to act. You still can't intervene directly, but it creates a record, she said. And records invite examination. I picked up the letter. The stamp no longer looked permanent. It looked heavy. People who rely on rules rarely imagine those rules being used against them, Mara added. I slipped the document back into my bag, careful not to crease it. He had signed it with confidence. That confidence had weight now, and it was no longer on his side. What does a room sound like when power quietly changes hands? No one announced why the board was meeting on such short notice. The calendar invitation was vague, mandatory, legal present. I took my seat without greeting anyone. Mara sat 2 chairs away, her folder closed, her expression neutral. Across the table, my former boss leaned back with his arms crossed, confidence intact. Already bored, the board chair cleared his throat. We'll begin with the matter of voting authority. A document appeared on the screen, dense, formal, unforgiving. The transfer has been verified. The chair continued. Effective immediately. Eliza Hart holds controlling voting rights in the parent company. The room didn't react all at once. It never does. Power lands in stages. One director adjusted her glasses. Another stopped taking notes. Someone exhaled sharply and didn't bother hiding it. My former boss leaned forward. That can't be correct. Mara spoke without looking at him. It is. He turned to me then. Really looked for the first time that week. The calculation came fast. Too fast. The version of me he had erased no longer fit the room. You knew, he said quietly. I followed the rules. I replied. The chair tapped the table once. This is not a discussion. This is a confirmation. Silence again. Thicker this time. No one congratulated me. No one smiled. Authority doesn't arrive with applause. It arrives with recalibration. The chair continued. Given the transition, all recent executive actions will be subject to standard review. My former boss straightened. That won't be necessary. The chair didn't respond to him. He turned to Mara instead. Council will advise on scope. Mara nodded. We will. That was it. No speech, no acknowledgement beyond procedure. My name remained on the screen for another moment before the slide changed. As the meeting adjourned, people stood without ceremony. Conversations started and stopped around me, careful now, measured. My former boss lingered, searching my face for something he could still use. There was nothing left to offer. Power had settled, quietly, officially, and the way his jaw tightened told me he already knew this wasn't finished. What do desperate people do when they lose control of facts? I learned the answer before anyone spoke to me directly. Mara forwarded the first article without comment. A trade blog I recognized. Anonymous sources. Concerned insiders. The headline didn't mention my name, but it didn't need to. Leadership transition raises stability concerns. I scrolled slowly. Emotionally driven decisions. Unclear qualifications. Boardroom uncertainty following a sudden inheritance. The language was careful, crafted to sound responsible, designed to plant doubt without leaving fingerprints. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text. Settle quietly, or I'll make this ugly. No greeting, no signature. He never needed one. Mara watched my face as I set the phone down. He's trying to control the narrative. He always did. I replied. Another alert appeared. An internal email this time. Someone had forwarded it to half the company. Temporary leadership measures pending further clarity. Pending clarity. As if the clarity hadn't already been documented, voted on, and entered into record. Mara shook her head. This is reckless. He thinks speed will save him. And fear, she added. A pause settled between us. You could respond, she said. A statement, reassurance, something measured. I looked at the phone again, at the text waiting for an answer. No, I said. That's what he wants. Silence unnerves people who are used to controlling noise. Another message came through the minutes later. I know where the weak spots are. Don't force me to use them. I handed the phone to Mara. She read it once, then again. This crosses a line, she said. It confirms one. I replied. I didn't block the number. I didn't reply. I let the screen go dark. By the end of the day, the story had spread far enough to make people nervous. Not panicked. Nervous. The kind of unease that turns into questions. Mara closed her folder. Threats like that don't come from confidence. They come from history, I said. She nodded. And history leaves records. I picked up the termination letter from my desk drawer and set it beside the phone. He was trying to bury me in noise. He didn't realize he had just pointed us toward the past he was most afraid to open. What happens when numbers start answering questions people avoid? The threshold is met, Mara said, for cause. That was all it took. The authorization moved quickly after that. Quietly, no announcement, no memo. Access logs sealed. Systems mirrored. The kind of work that happens without ceremony because ceremony would invite interference. I sat across from Daniel Reyes, a forensic analyst brought in under outside counsel. He didn't waste time with reassurances. We're not looking for intent, he said, sliding a preliminary report toward me. We're looking for consistency. The first inconsistency appeared on the third page. These figures, he continued, tapping the column. Reported occupancy versus deposited revenue. They don't reconcile. By how much enough to matter? Mara leaned in. Patterned. Yes, Daniel replied. Quarter after quarter. The door opened before anyone could speak again. A young woman stepped in, breath shallow, clutching a small drive in her hand. I recognized her from Communications Junior. Careful, usually invisible. I was told to bring this if anything happened, she said. He said it was insurance. Mara took the drive, against what she swallowed, against being blamed. Daniel connected it to a clean terminal. Emails populated the screen, drafts, directives, messaging strategies that never went public. And this, Daniel said, opening another folder, policy revisions. My eyes caught on a familiar heading. Zero tolerance data integrity clause. Mara froze. That clause was pushed through aggressively. Daniel nodded. Authored and approved by the same executive. I didn't need to ask who. He insisted it apply retroactively, Daniel added. To everyone. The room settled into a new kind of silence. Not anticipation, recognition. The junior staffer stood rigid. Am I in trouble? No, Mara said. You're a witness. Daniel closed the file. This changes the scope. I looked at the screen one last time. The rule, the signatures, the certainty behind them. He hadn't just trusted the system. He had built it to protect himself. And that confidence was about to become the only thing left holding him in place. What do you say when your own rules are read back to you? My former boss arrived with confidence sharpened into something brittle. His attorney followed, briefcase in hand, already prepared to negotiate. Let's be efficient, he said. Taking his seat, I'm willing to walk away quietly. Mara didn't respond. Neither did the board. He continued anyway. $6 million in severance. Immediate vesting of deferred compensation. A non-disparagement agreement on both sides. I pressed the remote. The screen behind me came alive. Numbers, tables, timestamps. Daniel's voice came through the speaker. Calm, exact. These figures represent reported occupancy rates across 12 consecutive quarters. My former boss leaned forward. That data is internal. So is the discrepancy, Daniel replied. Reported occupancy averaged 98%. Actual deposited revenue aligns with 82%. A pause. That's a clerical issue, my former boss said. Creative accounting. Everyone understands stop, his attorney said quietly. All eyes shifted. The attorney closed the briefcase, slowly, deliberately. I need a moment with my client. There's no need, Mara said. She slid a document across the table. You may want to read the clause first. My former boss didn't touch it. His attorney did. The silence stretched. The attorney's jaw tightened. Then he stood. I'm withdrawing. He said, effective immediately. What my former boss looked up, sharp and startled. You authored this policy, Mara said, finally addressing him directly. Zero tolerance data integrity, retroactive, for cause termination. I spoke then, not loudly, not with satisfaction. You insisted it protect the company from people like you. He stared at the screen again, as if the numbers might rearrange themselves. The board chair cleared his throat. Termination for cause is approved. No vote count was read aloud. No objections followed. Security stepped in without instruction. My former boss stood slowly, not angry, not pleading, just hollow. He looked at me one last time, searching for something that no longer existed. The door closed behind him. The screen went dark, and for the first time since the stamp hit paper, the system spoke louder than he ever had. Is losing everything louder or quieter than winning the vote didn't echo. It didn't need to. Termination for cause, the chair said. Already moving on to the next agenda item. Effective immediately. No one asked about severance. No one mentioned options or transition statements. The silence answered those questions faster than words ever could. My former boss remained seated for a moment, as if waiting for a correction that wasn't coming. There will be no public comment, the chair added. Legal will handle disclosures. His mouth opened, closed again. Mara gathered her papers. Your access is revoked as of now. Security stepped forward, not rushed, not aggressive. Routine. He stood, jacket still buttoned, posture careful. This isn't how it ends, he said, voice low, trying to leave something behind. No one responded. At the door, he paused, looked back at the table, at the screen that no longer showed his numbers. At me. You're making a mistake, he said. I didn't rise. I didn't answer. The door closed with a soft, final sound. The meeting continued without him. Afterward, directors filtered out in pairs, then alone. No congratulations. No sideways glances. Just recalibration. One of them stopped beside my chair. You'll appoint an interim, not today, I replied. He nodded, accepting the answer without challenge. In the hallway, Mara walked beside me. They'll expect an announcement. They'll get one, I said. About standards, not replacements. She studied me for a beat. You don't want his role. I don't want his habits. We reached the elevator. The doors opened. Empty. As we stepped inside, my phone vibrated. An alert from internal systems. One account deactivated, then another. His name disappearing in stages. The doors closed. I watched the floor numbers change, steady and indifferent. I hadn't come to take his place. I had come to make sure no one like him ever felt that secure again. What do you remove when you don't need revenge anymore? I didn't call a meeting. I didn't ask for permission. I emailed human resources with Mara copied. Remove the termination stamp from all active and archived HR workflows. I wrote, effective immediately. A few minutes later, the HR director appeared in my doorway. Careful, measured. That stamp has been in use for years. I know, I replied. That's why it needs to go. She hesitated. It was meant to standardize process. It was used to end conversations. I said, those are not the same thing. She nodded once. I'll issue the update. That was it. No announcement, no memo framed as a victory, just a system quietly corrected. Later that afternoon, I met with the senior leadership team, not to introduce myself, not to explain the past. We are changing how authority is exercised, I said. No decisions made in isolation, no language that erases people to protect outcomes. One of them shifted in his chair. And if someone disagrees, then it's documented, I replied, and addressed, not buried. No one argued. After they left, I sat alone for a moment, the room finally still. I took the termination letter from my bag. The ink had faded slightly. The stamp looked smaller than it had before. It never defined my value. It only revealed his. I tore the page once, then again, slow, deliberate. Dropped the pieces into the shredder and watched them disappear. I didn't take his office. I didn't take his title. I kept my name. Before I shut down my computer for the night, I typed one final note to myself and saved it where no one else would see it. Power that relies on humiliation is fragile. Authority that fears transparency cannot last. And no one who needs to silence you was ever qualified to measure your worth. I stood, turned off the light, and walked out knowing the stamp was gone. So was the need to prove anything to anyone.